Thank you, Thami. Looking at your top stories, Liberia launches unprecedented reconciliation campaign and no hold up in talks on reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. Your latest news, greetings to our listeners. Liberian President Joseph Boakai has launched what his office described as an unprecedented reconciliation campaign. The campaign will be overseeing memorial services for two assassinated presidents and issuing the government's first apology to war victims. The high-profile ceremonies come more than 2 decades after the end of civil conflicts that resulted in some 2,000 deaths and saw widespread atrocities, including massacres, rape, and the use of child soldiers. They also coincide with calls by human rights groups for domestic war crimes prosecutions, which have yet to start despite an executive order to establish a war crimes court last year. At least 2 hospitals in Kenya were damaged during protests to mark the 35th anniversary of pro-democracy rallies. This is a day after the demonstrations left 11 people dead. Tensions have been running high in the East African nation since the death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody last month. That brought people back onto the streets this year after anti-government protesters stormed parliament. Branch manager at one of the hospitals situated in Mbakasi neighborhood said the armed men stormed the premises on Monday evening and stole equipment worth over $6,000. More than 50 people have been killed during an attack by gunmen in central Nigeria's Plateau state. The victims were members of a volunteer force that was set up to protect villagers from raids. The BBC's Chris Ewoko reports.
A resident of the area told the BBC that 56 bodies were recovered after the ambush, but some vigilantes are still missing and feared to have been killed. Members of the local volunteer force had moved into the forest during an operation to target armed gangs that have been raiding their communities. These self-defense groups were set up after the police and the army failed to offer enough protection. Plateau State is the scene of frequent clashes between nomadic herders and farming communities over access to land. Last month, more than 50 people were killed and dozens of homes were burnt down by gunmen during raids across the state.
A member of the Mayoral Committee for Roads and Transport in South Africa's Johannesburg City, Thami Ngubeni, says there must be an amendment to the law that requires that an alternative accommodation is provided for those being evicted, especially from hijacked or unsafe buildings. Ngubeni, together with the city law enforcement officers, raided several businesses in Johannesburg where they found many undocumented migrants working in unsafe conditions. Over 60 undocumented migrants have been arrested during a raid at various businesses in the west of Johannesburg. Some of the properties had connected water and electricity illegally. Ngubeni was speaking on his last day as acting Johannesburg mayor.
I think that the same applies to illegal buildings. The law of the country has to be amended on the evictions on properties. Criminals have seen a loophole and they are now using this loophole that the law says when you evict anyone, you must find an alternative accommodation for them.
Lastly, US President Donald Trump has insisted that there is no hold-up in talks on reaching a ceasefire in Gaza after the latest round of indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas ended without a breakthrough. Trump was speaking as he hosted a dinner in Washington with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu rejected possibility of full Palestinian statehood, saying that Israel would always keep overall security control.
I think Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, but none of the powers to threaten us. And that means that certain powers, like overall security, will always remain in our hands. Now, that is a fact. And no one in Israel will agree to anything else because we don't commit suicide. We want life, we cherish life for ourselves, for our neighbors.
Recapping on your top stories, Liberian President Joseph Boakai has launched what his office describes as an unprecedented reconciliation campaign. The campaign will be overseeing memorial services for two assassinated presidents and issuing the government's first apology to war victims. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And in your sports news this hour, representatives from top 10 tennis players met officials at Wimbledon just last week to discuss increasing the prize money and having a greater say in the running of the Grand Slams, while Newcastle United have agreed a deal of $74 million with Nottingham Forest for Sweden winger Anthony Elanga. Details of these and other stories coming up at 4:30.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you to Onele Nzinzi and Musibudi Makura. They bring us to exactly 6 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. This is Africa in Business on Channel Africa. You can engage with us on our various social media platforms on X, Instagram and YouTube. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook, we are at Channel Africa. A rundown of what we've got in store for you, a deep dive into the reciprocal 30% tariffs that the United States has imposed on South Africa. What then is the way forward? Perspectives this afternoon from the country director for Verto, as well as the African United Business Confederation. Also under our radar this afternoon, a foundation called Leroe Foundation, focusing on uplifting communities as well as their businesses with practical hands-on support. And finally this afternoon on Africa in Business, our Standard Bank feature, a commentary slot with Standard Bank where we look at the upcoming Africa Unlocked conference. It's 7 minutes after 4 p.m.
Thami Ngubeni on Africa in Business. 4 till 5 p.m. Central African Time.
We begin here this afternoon. It is indeed one of our top leading stories as United States President Donald Trump imposes a 30% tariff on goods from South Africa set to take effect on the 1st of August. Jock Ferris, Director and Sector Head for Industrials, Trade and Manufacturing at Cliff Decker Hofmeyr, believes the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement could provide a much-needed buffer against such global trade shocks. He says African businesses must urgently adapt to navigate the risks posed by growing geopolitical tensions as well as shifting trade dynamics. Channel Africa's business reporter Innocent Samosa has the details.
Geopolitical uncertainty has disrupted businesses across the African continent, with South African companies among the hardest hit. In response, business leaders are meeting in Johannesburg to identify the sectors most at risk and explore the root causes of their vulnerability. Industry experts point to manufacturing, mining and agriculture as particularly exposed to global tensions. Nastasia Hardeth, Director of the Corporate Department and Turnaround Practice at Clive Decker Hofmeyr, government policy will be crucial in helping industries withstand such instability.
I think it's incredibly important, but I think that more important is for companies to realize what is within their realm of control right now. I think it's something called active acceptance. You accept that right now the geopolitical landscape is a little bit of a roller coaster ride, and what is within my control as a company to kind of navigate this crazy landscape that I'm facing.
Meanwhile, Jackwell Ferris, Director and Sector Head for Industrials, Trade and Manufacturing at Clive Decker Hofmeyr, says Africa must strategically position itself to navigate rising geopolitical tensions and global trade wars. He believes the African Continental Free Trade Area, or AFTA, presents a key solution to shielding the continent from such external shocks.
Yeah, I think from an African perspective, we need to really look at where we're going. So we have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and I think what needs to happen with the trade war, it's not just affecting South Africa, it's affecting a number of African countries also. But we need to actually be more intentional. So we have this agreement, but we're not intentional enough, I think, from a political perspective to ensure that we actually have the right domestic policies in place. We have the overarching AFCFTA to encourage and ensure that trade actually happen on a continental level, because that's potentially the solution, as part of our discussion today, is in terms of adaptation. So we have all of these uncertainties. We have the trade tariffs that has been imposed, which is also a unilateral tariff.
But is Africa doing enough to diversify its trade and investment partnerships to reduce external shocks? Ken Afra, Senior Associate Director, Financial Advisory Turnaround and Restructuring at Deloitte, weighs in.
So I believe that Africans are very resilient. We've been through a number of shocks, the pandemic, for example, and what we've seen is that corporates have built resilience through those experiences. So cash levels, for example, higher than they were prior to the pandemic. However, of course, with Trump's tariffs coming in, that does cause a huge amount of uncertainty. And so there are additional things that we believe that corporates can look at. For example, their working capital cycle, looking to their funders and taking cost out of their processes to further build resilience on top of the resilience that's already been built following the pandemic.
For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 12 minutes after 4 p.m. as we continue our focus on the 30% reciprocal tariffs that have been imposed by the United States on South African exports. Joining us this afternoon is Cornelius Coetzee, South Africa Country Director for Verto. He says the United States President Donald Trump's decision to impose these trade tariffs on South African exports creates a complex and challenging environment for local businesses. Coetzee says that market diversification, streamlining operations and cutting costs could just help businesses navigate the current climate. He joins us now on the line. A very good afternoon to you, Cornelius Coetzee. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
So the South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, has asked for more time to negotiate a trade deal with the United States President and his administration. This is before the higher tariff regime goes into effect on the 1st of August. What are the chances of his success? Would these negotiations yield anything positive?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer, but from a personal point of view, I think we are going to face these tariffs nonetheless, and we need to brace ourselves for the worst. I think the president has made it very clear last night in his writing to President Ramaphosa that there is going to be a tariff imposed, and we will have to seek out ways in which we can leverage a partnership between the two countries. But he's also made it very, very clear that the United States is the country to deal with and the best in the world, as it were. So, quote unquote. So I think it's definitely going to be here to stay. We'll need to find ways in which we can improve our ability to trade globally without the reliance on the US.
One of the key areas that is likely to be put on the table during the negotiations of this trade deal is South Africa's stance on this. South Africa is disputing the basis on which the tariffs have been calculated and saying that U.S. imports only accrue a 7.6% tariff and that 77% of the goods coming in from the United States actually enter duty-free. Your thoughts and comments on this?
Well, I think the government's position is firstly going to be to secure what we value the most in terms of commodity trading. So I do believe also that steel and manufactured goods will definitely be on the table for a negotiation to waive a tariff or to significantly reduce those tariffs. At the same time, I think it's the wrong time to have a back and forth between the US and South Africa in terms of how the tariffs are calculated. I think the US has made their stance quite clear that they are definitely going to impose the tariff nonetheless. And essentially, I mean, the impact on the global economy and especially on the South African economy is that our products are going to be more expensive and less favorable to the US market. But at the same time, from a domestic point of view, we face this crossroads where we could potentially see large corporates moving out of South Africa and setting up shop in the US and no longer benefiting from the South African favoritism in a sense from labor laws, from cost of doing business. And that's definitely going to have a significant impact on our GDP and the stability of the economy.
And that's a really interesting point, because that is what Donald Trump said, saying that these goods and these companies would be exempt from these tariffs if they were to set up manufacturing base for themselves in the United States. Obviously, it would stimulate their economy, create employment, create jobs, etc. But what is the likelihood of this happening, especially considering that a large number of the exports that are going to be affected, we're talking the likes of minerals, of car parts, citrus, for example, are these sectors transmutable? Can one actually set up these type of industries in the United States, considering what their raw materials were, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think if we sort of segment it by industry, if we look at manufacturing products, if you look at finished goods like vehicles, those products were relatively cheap to produce in South Africa, in Africa in general, but more so South Africa. And I think the large brands that have always been sort of at the forefront of these kind of topics, where they were exploring ways in which they can exit South Africa, given the various economical challenges that we had in terms of load shedding, et cetera, it was always sort of a topic of discussion. And I think in certain segments or industries, we do potentially see a risk of this actually becoming a real thing. I think the US is on a hunt to centralize their capability to produce and grow the economy. But then there's other components to the agricultural sector where the US doesn't have the capability to feed the entire population of the US. So they will need to import goods from countries that have an abundance of that. And citrus, amongst others, one of the very, very hot topics at the moment, especially with us at Verto. And that stuff is not going to go away, right? So he's going to have to make some concessions here and there. And I do believe it's going to be on minerals. It's most likely going to be on agricultural products, but big corporates in the manufacturing industry, I do believe there's a very real chance of them exiting the economy should there be a unfavorable outcome.
Cornelius Coetzee, thank you so much for putting that into perspective for us this afternoon. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Cornelius Coetzee. He's South Africa Country Director for Verto. The impact that this will have on the South African job market is immense. When we look at citrus alone, over 35,000 jobs would stand to be shed should these various companies actually move out of South Africa. Also, we're looking at the issues of job creation and the currency. I mean, the Rand reacted, after this announcement. It fell over 1%. This is immediately after the announcement. It did, however, recover by about 0.6 percentage points as the markets started to stabilize. But certainly you were seeing that reaction as far as the volatility of the currency is concerned. South Africa now has a window period of between now and the 1st of August to try and convince US President Donald Trump of lowering the tax rate from 30% to something lower. The argument that's being put forward by South Africa is that 7.6% is actually what the average US tariffs are on goods being imported into the country, and that 77% of those goods are actually duty-free. It's 19 minutes after 4 p.m. Another perspective on this coming up with the African United Business Confederation.
Annika Longi sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons à présent dérouler notre tapis rouge pour accueillir notre personnalité du jour, l'artiste chanteur Sheky Frey, qui est en ligne de Guinée avec nous.
Je suis un artiste guinéen, un créateur, un styliste, et je fais un peu ce qui plaît à mes fans. Voilà, c'est un peu ça. On a beaucoup de genres de trucs à faire, mais bon, pour le moment, on est basé un peu sur le rap.
D'accord. À quelle période de votre vie avez-vous commencé à vous intéresser à la musique, Sheky?
Bon, je crois pas qu'il y ait une période, parce que moi, je suis un mélomane depuis mon petit âge.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Are Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 21 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. So we spoke a bit earlier on to Cornelius Kutsia, who's South Africa Country Director for Virtual. Weighing in now is the African United Business Confederation. They say they are concerned as well as disappointed with the recent announcement by the United States of America that they'll be imposing a 30% tariff increase on select South African goods. The Confederation says the move is counterproductive and unjustified, especially at a time when global economies require stronger partnerships and mutual economic recovery efforts. Joining us to take this further is Mr. George Sibulela from the African United Business Confederation. He is the president. A very good afternoon to you, so welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invite.
So you say that the decision by the United States government threatens to destabilize trade relations between South Africa and the United States. How so?
Look, we should not undermine that U.S. is a large economy of the world, and what we expect as business, in particular in the emerging markets such as South Africa, is for U.S. to play a key role in ensuring that the economy of South Africa and Africa becomes better, where we can be able to create jobs and so on, and alleviate this poverty that we have lived in for many, many years. You must remember that this 30% tariff increase is going to have a huge impact to the country in multiple effects. One is we're going to see a large decline in SA exports to the US. And this will affect a multiple of different industries, such as automotive components, the metal industry. Bear in mind that we, as South Africa, export a lot of manganese, aluminium, and steel. Agricultural products, in particular, the likes of wine and citrus fruit, textile and apparel will be affected. And then, obviously, the trade balance pressure that we are going to feel, it's humongous. We could see, I'm sure you've seen even in the markets, that the rand has been impacted. We're going to have a challenge on the foreign exchange reserves and the balance of payments. So these are very direct. They've got very direct impact to the economy. Look at the potential job losses when we lose exports, how much impact we're going to have. We're going to see industries who heavily rely on U.S. exports will be forced to cut production. Then in that aspect, at the end, it means a lot of employees are going to lose jobs. And when we talk investments, it's even worse, because foreign direct investment will now begin to look at the markets that favor their returns. And South Africa, I can tell you, will not be one of those. So yes, there's a huge impact.
You mentioned markets there, and when the tariffs were initially announced, suggestions at looking into alternate markets were made. Which markets do you think should be looked into?
If you talk about what South Africa can do to avoid such occurrences to happen again, obviously there are alternative markets that we must begin to look at and increase our trade with, where the tariffs are much more favorable. And that will be the European Union, the Chinese market, and obviously acceleration of our own market in Africa, which is through a continental free trade agreement.
You've spoken and you've appealed to the likes of the African Union, to regional blocs, as well as global trade organizations to stand in solidarity with South Africa and to advocate for what you've called balanced and inclusive trade practices. What would these inclusive trade practices entail?
Well, I mean, firstly, is one of the best practices to make sure that we have a zero tariff. That's basically what we all expect when we go to those markets, and I think the world has changed so much now. We must have countries that are willing to really make deals, not to be one-sided. You can, I mean, if you look at this announcement, you can tell that the U.S. was, to a certain extent, a little bit harsh on the basis to say, if South Africa, for whatever reason, decide to increase tariffs against the U.S. for 30%, they say, no, for what we have given you 30%, you will get another 30% on top, which is 60% tariffs. In a nutshell, they will increase to another 30%. So in a nutshell, it says, we have given you, take it, negotiate it, be nice. If you are not nice, it can either go up or down. You choose.
I'd like us for a moment to put ourselves in Trump's shoes. You mentioned that, trade should not be one-sided, that it should be more equitable. From Donald Trump's perspective, this is exactly what he is trying to do. As he says, for decades, the United States has borne the brunt of compensating and decreasing, and in some instances just removing tariffs completely when trading with other countries. This, he says, is his effort at getting something that is not one-sided, that's balanced, but that also benefits the United States. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, as I say, every president is obviously looking at making deals for their own country. The logic is we must not forget that there are emerging markets that are trying to build economies for many, many years, and South Africa is one of those. The role that U.S. is supposed to play in the South African economy is of a mother and son, not to treat it as if it's a second world economy. It's the second largest economy in the world, like China. If you do that to our, fragile economy, you are basically suppressing our country not to grow, not to go anywhere. You are basically saying, let's increase this unemployment, let these people feel pressure, and then we can dictate what we want. And I think that's where the mistake is. It's not we're not comparing like for like basis. And I'm saying it could have been handled differently, as much as the team of South African government is in discussion to negotiate the relationship on AGOA and the relationship with the tariffs. That process should have been given the opportunity to be concluded and understand the story without preempting what he believes is the correct thing to do for the U.S.
Mr. George Sibulela, we thank you very much for your insight this afternoon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. George Sibulela. He's president of the African United Business Confederation. He takes us to exactly 29 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time, just after we have our markets update, indicators and sports news. We'll be back with your latest business news as we have our usual commentary slot with Standard Bank, looking at Africa Unlocked, a conference that will be going on over the next few days, and also a foundation making sure that communities and young people have practical hands-on support in starting as well as growing their businesses. At 4:30 this afternoon, let's make way for the markets desk, where Chanduko Ligege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. These are your markets from the African continent. 1 US dollar is trading at 17 Rand 74 in South Africa, Botswana 13 Pula 13, Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 74, Zambia 24 Kwacha 19. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 455, Ethiopia 137 bih 543, Uganda 3,567 shilling, Tanzania 2,640 shilling. 1 US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 529. In Egypt, the dollar is at 49 Egyptian pound 51, Tunisia 2 dinar 89. Algeria 128 dinar 746, Morocco the dollar will cost you 8 dirham 88. Angola 912 kwanza, the Congolese franc is 2,865 to the US dollar. Commodities, gold is at $3,316, platinum at $1,355 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $69.40 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for your latest report on business news, here is Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And a very good afternoon from the sports desk. I am Musibudi Makura with your latest sports news at the Sawa. So KwaZulu-Natal Athletics in South Africa has confirmed that they plan to fund the travel expenses of coach Samuel Sebeng, who mentors world indoor 800-meter champion Prudence Khodiso. So with a few Diamond League meetings still to come this year, attention is now turning to preparations for the World Senior Championships in Tokyo, Japan later on this year. Mgasi, who was re-elected for a second term just last month, told the national broadcaster that the KwaZulu-Natal Athletics would rather invest in supporting coaches like Samuel Sebeng by covering their travel expenses, including flight tickets, accommodation, as well as training camps, than waste money on legal battles over leadership disputes in the province.
So all of them, we acknowledge their hard work and they have our full support. This is where we would rather spend our athletics and money than to spend it in courts or to spend it at taverns.
Mkasi, a lawyer by profession, says that while funding all coaches may not be possible due to the financial constraints, KwaZulu-Natal Athletics will do its best to support as many as it can. He assured that they will be working on a solution that will benefit both athletes as well as coaches, aiming, of course, to ensure that everyone contributes to the overall success of the sport.
But you will also appreciate that each athlete has a coach. So you would have Zagitinen going to Diamond League. You will have now Prudence going to Diamond League. You will have Chite going to Diamond League. And all these athletes represent clubs in KZN and they are coached by different coaches. It will be difficult for us to fund each and every one of the coaches to go and spend time with the athletes in Europe, where we know that the rent does not really go far in those countries. So we are looking forward to discussions within KZNA to see how we can best assist the coaches.
On to this now. Newcastle United have agreed a $74 million fee with Nottingham Forest for Sweden winger Anthony Elanga. Now, sources have told BBC Sport that the deal could be completed by the end of this week. Newcastle are seeking to strengthen their attacking options as they prepare for the return of the Champions League following a fifth-place finish in the Premier League last season. Newcastle have yet to pay a fee this transfer window, with 18-year-old Spanish winger Antonio Cordero the only new arrival on a free transfer from Malaga. Forest are believed to have paid $20 million to sign Elanga from Manchester United on a 5-year deal. On to this story now. As players continue to ask the Grand Slams for more prize money, the chair of the All England Club has suggested those questions should be better directed to the regular tour events. Now, representatives from top 10 players met officials at Wimbledon just last week to discuss the increasing prize money and also having a greater say in the running of Grand Slams. The Professional Tennis Players Association, meanwhile, have begun legal action against the ATP Tour, the WTA Tour, the International Tennis Federation, as well as the International Tennis Integrity Agency. It claims prize money is artificially restricted and that the 11 months season is unsustainable. Players have frequently also pointed to the vast revenues generated by Grand Slams and also feel they deserve significantly a bigger and a high return. Now, ATP Tour figures for the 2023 season shows that players earned 30% of their income from Grand Slams, a total of $241.6 million, including prize money, performance bonuses, as well as retirement contributions, was provided by the ATP, with an additional $104.5 million in Grand Slam prize money. This year's PGA Tour in golf will offer more than $400 million in prize money, and it stages several events with bigger prize funds than any of the four majors. Now, Wimbledon prize money has doubled over the past 10 years to $72 million, but players wonder why they do not make more than $551.5 million in revenue recorded at the All England Club most recent financial statement. And with that, it's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Give us a call. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you to Musibudi Makura for the latest in sport and Chanduko Ligege for our economic indicators. If you have any stories you'd like to share, stories that you believe would be of interest to our listeners both on the African continent and in the diaspora, do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. I'm also quite keen to find out what your reactions are on the 30% tariff increase that Donald Trump will be imposing on South Africa. That is, of course, if there are no deals negotiated before the implementation date of the 1st of August. You'll find us on X at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa, on Instagram and YouTube at Channel Africa 1. Do find us there and make your comments as to what you think. And will South Africa be successful in negotiating Trump down? Could they possibly get themselves a better deal? It's 4:38.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa. The African perspective.
The leading trade fair for water, waste and recycling in Southern Africa, IFAT Africa, officially opened its exhibition floor this morning in Johannesburg, South Africa. The event brings together local and global innovators to explore sustainable solutions for the continent's environmental challenges. Our reporter, Lebogang Mabange, attended the opening and filed this report.
It was a busy morning at Galaga Convention Center as IFAT Africa 2025 opened its doors to the public and industry players. The exhibition floor is a hive of innovation, from advanced waste treatment systems to water-saving technologies, all geared towards building a more sustainable future for Africa. Roger MacDonald, representing the Water Research Commission, says water is more than just a commodity, it's central to survival.
In South Africa, water isn't just a commodity, it's a lifeline. We've witnessed firsthand the looming crisis with Day Zero in Cape Town, serving as a stark reminder of our vulnerability. Across our nation, municipalities grapple with alarming levels of non-revenue water that's lost and unbilled, often due to lack of accountability and at consumer levels. This situation impacts us all. To truly secure the future of our water resources, effective management must extend beyond the council's chambers, right into every connection.
Exhibitors say the event is not just about products, it's about positioning Africa as a driver of homegrown solutions. Khan from the Water Science says they are focused on long-term growth and chemical innovation that can shape future infrastructure.
The reason why we need to be here is because water science is more than just a company whereby we want to just go to these factories and clean the water and things like that. We want to be a brand. We want to move globally. We want to move continentally as far as we can go. We have our raw samples from different wastes, from different factories like paper, textile, wash, and corn, from the chemicals that we are manufacturing in our own factory. So we find this out, we do our measurements all based on the chemicals that we're using, all based on how the solids separate from the water, from the sample, and then we can design you a plant whereby maybe you use a depth.
For others, like German-based company Eagerman, IFED Africa is their entry point into the continent. Riyad Ben Slama says their waste processing technology is already used in Europe and Asia, but this is their first African showcase.
We produce shredding machines, separator machines, and compost turner machines. We know already the IFED from other markets in the world, from Europe to Asia, Australia, and so on. And the IFED in Africa is for us something new because we have not been there yet. It's our first experience here. That's why we said, well, it's maybe a good opportunity to come here to present our company, to present our products.
Meanwhile, Clement Mpurwana from Erzen, Germany, says the platform allows companies to explore partnerships that could strengthen green tech and hydrogen solutions.
But just by being here, we could form what you call JVs, joint ventures, because sometimes the technology does require that we partner with someone else. And by us being here, we're able to then see the right eye and say, oh my goodness, Farm Systems has this that we actually need at the end of our product in order to connect to Hydak and Kaiser. So it's a form of basically just trying to see which we are networking in the right space.
With 2 more days to go, IFED Africa continues to offer a space for collaboration, innovation and climate-conscious thinking, proving that solutions to Africa's challenges can begin right here on its own soil. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:42 Central African time. We are this afternoon going to be focusing on a really extraordinary foundation. They're called the Leruo Foundation. They are a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting young business leaders in South Africa. The foundation works directly with aspiring entrepreneurs within their communities by providing them with personalized mentorship as well as peer collaboration, and ensures that business owners receive practical, hands-on support that's tailored to their specific needs. Last month, Leruo Foundation hosted its first Youthpreneurs Summit, an event that combined practical learning with tangible support for young entrepreneurs. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Connie Matlejwane, CEO of CRM Enterprise and also founder of Leruo Foundation. A very good afternoon to you, Connie. Good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Hi, Thami. Thank you for welcoming us. I'm glad to be back on your show once again.
So could you tell us more about yourselves as a Leruo Foundation and the type of support that you offer young entrepreneurs?
So Leruo, we are focusing on youth-led businesses. As we were on your show, I think around March, to launch the foundation. Now we've had our youth summit on the 16th of June. We had invited about 18 youthpreneurs to come and pitch their businesses to us. And they came out, they showcased what they can. And we had Brian Sakara of B2B Divine, who manufactures t-shirts. as the winner of the pitch competition, and he walked away with 100,000 rand to scale up his business. So now the next step last Saturday we had a breakfast with all the change makers. We call them change makers now, the ones who were pitching. So we had a breakfast meeting with them just to drill into individual businesses to see what it is that they lack and how can we support them going forward. We are launching our 10-month Change Makers Incubation Program, which we are very excited about. So this group of young people who pitched at our summit, they are the first cohort of this Change Makers Incubation Program.
I mean,
what we learned...
Please go ahead.
So what we learned from the network, the business meeting that we had with them is that we really have to start from the beginning, because when you talk about contracts, when you talk about pricing, when you talk about even payslips, it's something that are foreign to some of these youthpreneurs. For them, it's just launching a business and then you're just running with it. So we are really going to have to take it from the very basics and take them through all the aspects of the businesses over the next 10 months.
And that's really what I wanted to ask you about next, the approach that you've chosen with the entrepreneurs. You've called this the grassroots approach. Why has this been important, and what have you noticed on the ground as you're starting to groom young people, as you start mentoring them?
Because with most enterprise development program, with most incubation program, you find that it's very high level. Just to get into it, you already need to have management accounts. You already need to have annual financial statements. You need to be established. So the young people that we are working with, they are really starting from the basics. When I tell you that some of them, they don't even think that it's important to have a business contract with your employees, you can tell that we really have to take it to that very basic level. So for me, it's very important that we take that grassroots level so that they don't feel excluded. So that whenever and the next opportunity comes where they're asking them for management accounts, they know what they're talking about. When they ask them for annual financial statements, they know what they're talking about, because most of them, they have no idea.
So talk us through the life cycle of the program that you have. Yes, you've done your first, Youthpreneur Summit. That's very much event-based. But talk to us about the skill sets that you hope the entrepreneurs will be left with by the time they come out of your program.
So what we are going to start with, the very first, so what we're going to do over the next 10 months, we're going to have monthly sessions, monthly workshops. So the very first one that we're going to do, it's going to be focusing on business modeling for them to understand the type of business that you are going into and who your target market is and why do you have this specific target market. And then we are going to go into the risks that comes with having a business and how to mitigate those risks, especially for startups. And then we are going to go into financial management and budgeting so that they can understand what it is to have a budget for your business. We are going to go into marketing and branding.
So yes. Really just the entire spectrum. And I think what's quite encouraging about our conversation is the fact that it's not just a once-off where you win money, that yes, you'll reinvest into your business, but that really is a program, a mentorship program that will give them the A to Z of entrepreneurship, how to start, manage, run, and grow a business. We thank you very much, Connie, and we wish you continued success with the work that you do.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate the opportunity, and we are looking forward to taking these young people on this journey with us and to see their businesses grow and scale up. Thank you, Thami.
Thank you very much, Connie. That's Connie Matlejwane. She's CEO of CRM Enterprise and founder as well of the Leruo Foundation. She takes us to exactly 10 minutes to 5 p.m.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Tamo kutuli branchi ndi Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 9 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African Time. And for this week's commentary slot with Standard Bank, we focus on Africa Unlocked, which is taking place on Wednesday, the 9th to the 11th of July in Cape Town, South Africa. Returning for its second consecutive year in 2025, Africa Unlocked is more than a conference. It's a strategic movement shaping the future of African commerce, investment and industrialization through dynamic dialogue, cutting-edge insights and catalytic partnerships. For more on this conference, we're joined by Andrew Mashanda, Executive Head of Africa Regions and Offshore for Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank. And he joins us now on the line. A very good afternoon to you, Andrew. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami. It's great to be here.
So tell us more about Africa Unlocked and what is it that we should be expecting on this year's agenda? And perhaps you're moving some of the outtakes from last year and moving them forward this year. Could you put all of that into perspective for us?
Yes, we are definitely carrying forward from the themes that we had from last year, and we're building on those themes on this year's conference. So in terms of our objectives, again, we'll continue with the theme of redefining Africa's narrative, looking at how we can shift Africa from aid dependency to actually full participation in the global value chains and having a significant influence. We're also looking at intra-Africa trade. How do we accelerate the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement? We also want to showcase the innovation that exists across the continent and also growth that is inclusive and the impact pathways that obtain from that growth. But we're also looking at partnerships, how these partnerships have helped us play a role in facilitating the growth of our great continent. So we are looking at how these themes can actually play out in this year's conference going forward, yes.
With the global shifts that are currently happening, what we are seeing is a disintegration of global linkages, so to speak. Do you believe that Africa has the ability and the capability to become a leader in what is becoming a new world order?
I think what the global sort of themes that are playing out at the moment, whether it's geopolitical or other, have actually forced Africa to look more introspectively and more internally at what we are capable of doing. We are a resource-rich continent. We, in terms of resources, as in underground resources, but also human resources. We've got a young population and a young population that's growing and that's increasing in productivity. So we do see these themes that are playing out globally actually accelerating the growth in Africa, because we have to become more dependent on our own value chains and how those value chains can influence global value chains across the different sectors that we're playing in. And we believe as a Standard Bank, we can play a role in making sure that Africa gets connected to what's happening across the continent, but also make the continent a relevant player in the global economic space. Yeah.
And what would you then, on the back of what you've just described, what should you highlight as the main growth engines for the continent? What are the main drivers that would catapult Africa to the position of being a leader in the space?
I think firstly, I would like to talk about the intra-Africa trade. We do need to actually create a platform that allows African businesses to do businesses with each other, increase the volume and value of businesses across the continent, but also to see more African businesses invest in other African markets, to see a much more connected continent in terms of trans-regional business, but also the connectivity we have into China. And we are uniquely positioned to enable that for our businesses across the continent. How that plays out in terms of improving the flow of trade between Africa and China, but also ensuring that we see trade corridors beyond just China also playing a significant role, because we do know that there is a great demand indeed for African resources. We're beginning to see also human resources being of great demand, particularly in the technology space. And we are also beginning to see an export of that resource into other markets as well. So we do believe that we can provide access. We can also provide partnerships, create partnerships with our clients across the region in Africa, partnerships with Chinese corporates that we do work with, and also partnerships with the other sort of players that we have within the other continental groupings, such as Europe and the Americas as well.
And as we wrap up this afternoon, Andrew, just your thoughts on the opportunities presented by Africa's G20 presidency.
I think first and foremost is the global visibility, and the fact that a G20 summit is taking place in South Africa, I think is quite significant, and it's taking place on the African continent. It gives us a position, a very good position as a continent to position ourselves as a key influencer of the global discourse in terms of where the economies are going globally. It also positions us as an investment destination for other investors that are looking. But also it also increases our attractiveness for pools of capital that are sitting across the globe that are looking for the African opportunity. But it also, most importantly, shifts the narrative, as I mentioned earlier, from aid dependency to being a trade partner for growth globally. Yeah.
Certainly, those are all the things that Africa is focusing on right now, if not by choice, then by necessity, certainly. Andrew, thank you so much for your time and your insight this afternoon. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Thami.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You have a good one too. That's Andrew Mashanda, is Executive Head of Africa Regions and Offshore for Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank. It's now 4:58 Central African Time, and you say bonjour à vous d'Afrique avec Joël.
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les éditeurs de Channel Africa. Alors sur Vue d'Afrique, il sera question du Togo. La crise politique que traverse le Togo, de l'Afrique du Sud, avec la taxe de 30%, et aussi du Fonds monétaire international qui fait part de sa préoccupation sur les répercussions économiques de la guerre RDC-Rwanda. Voilà, c'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup, Joël. And that's how we come to the end of Africa in Business for today. Thank you to our amazing team, producer Mabu Buloka, technical operator Ndandulu Tuli, and on social media Ntsako Mashaba. News with Onele Nzinzi, economic decks Chanduko Legege, and Musibudi Makura on sport. I'm Thami Ngubeni as we sign off this afternoon for Africa in Business and hand over now to the French desk. You have yourself a splendid evening further. Goodbye.